Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne, and today I'm turning some of the most evil corporations into monster designs and talking about their crimes and scandals. First, the horrifying case of DuPont Chemicals. In 1998, a farmer named Wilbur Tennant walked into a sleek modern law firm with boxes of videotapes. On them, staticky images of his cattle, dead or dying, their bodies mangled by a disease his decades of experience could not identify. He had seen a strange foamy substance pouring into the water on his land and felt certain that someone was poisoning his farm. He told all of this to Rob Bilott, the last type of lawyer who would usually take this case. He specialized in corporate law, defending chemical companies. But after seeing the footage, Bilott knew something was really wrong and decided to take the case. What he didn't know at the time was that this choice was going to change the course of his entire life. The farmer, Mr. Tennant, already had a theory about what was going on. One of the biggest employers in this West Virginia town was DuPont Chemical, who Wilbur's brother Jim had sold 66 acres of the family farm to in the early 80s. He hadn't wanted to sell, but Jim had been experiencing strange, unexplained health problems and really needed the money. DuPont started using the area as a landfill. This area had a creek on the land that flowed directly into Wilbur Tennant's farm, the same creek that the cows like to drink from. Rob Bilott filed a federal suit against them with this information, and in response, DuPont paid for a study of the property and veterinarians that the company selected, who reported that DuPont did not find themselves responsible, that lifelong farmer Wilbur Tennant just wasn't taking very good care of his cows. They blamed their diet, poor fly control, and a lack of veterinary care, as if that could explain the miscolored organs, neurological decline, and deformed calves that were suddenly happening on the farm. Then Rob Bilott asked them for all the information that they could give him about a specific substance that he was able to find in a letter when he was doing some research between DuPont and the EPA, talking about PFOA. It was a chemical that he had never heard about and was having a lot of trouble finding any information on, and they absolutely refused. He ended up having to get a court order forcing them to give him information, and so to retaliate, they gave him like every piece of paper that they had. They just completely drowned his office in boxes to try to make it impossible for him to find the information he was looking for. But he didn't give up and ended up finding some of the most incriminating and complete evidence of the way that they were poisoning not only the Tennant farm, but over 100,000 people's drinking water with what we now call forever chemicals. What he found in their own internal documents is that even when they first started buying PFOA from a manufacturer who had created it called 3M, 3M had expressly told them that they needed to get rid of this chemical very carefully, either by incinerating it or sending it to a chemical waste facility. However, they decided to put them in these things called digestion ponds, which are basically just open pits in the ground where the chemicals could seep into the groundwater and basically just straight into the environment. This is really bad because as early as the 1970s, DuPont discovered that there were really high concentrations of PFOA in the blood of the people who actually worked at their factories, which they did not share with the EPA. In 1981, their manufacturer found out that ingesting the substance would cause disease and birth defects in rats. DuPont then checked in on some of their pregnant workers and discovered that 2 out of the 7 births that occurred had facial deformities or birth defects. In 1984, DuPont found this chemical in the factory chimneys, as well as in the local water supply. And in 1991, they wanted to test and see with their own scientists how much would be safe to have in the water, because they knew how much was in the local drinking water, and discovered that it was 3 times as much as they determined would be safe in the local drinking water. But of course, they did not make that information public. By the 1990s, they had seen from their own scientists that PFOA ingestion caused all kinds of tumor growth in lab animals, and so they started developing an alternative finally. They ended up coming up with one that appeared to be much safer and stay in the body for a considerably less long amount of time. But because they earn over $1 billion a year from their PFOA-laced products, DuPont decided not to move forward with the safer alternative. So now in the timeline, we're back to where we started, with the tenant farm. Here's a quote from the article that I used for my primary source for this portion of the video, The Lawyer Who Became DuPont's Worst Nightmare, published in the New York Times. By 1990, DuPont had dumped 7,100 tons of PFOA sludge into dry run landfill. DuPont scientists understood that the landfill drained into the tenant's remaining property, and they tested the water in Dry Run Creek. It contained an extraordinarily high concentration of PFOA. DuPont did not tell this to the tenants at the time, nor did it disclose the fact in the cattle report that it commissioned for the tenant case a decade later, the report that blamed poor husbandry for the deaths of their cows. Billet had what he needed. DuPont tried to get a gag order to stop Rob Billet and the farmer from talking to the EPA, but of course this failed, and he sent all of his findings to the Environmental Protection Agency. If you want to hear the full story of what happens after this point, I highly recommend the article in the New York Times, The Lawyer Who Became DuPont's Worst Nightmare, or the 2020 film Dark Waters by Todd Haynes. The point is, this corporation knowingly for decades poisoned hundreds of thousands of people's drinking water, causing birth defects, giving people cancer, and killing people just because they didn't want it to affect their bottom line. Even as they knew they were pouring an insane amount of this poison into the creek that flowed directly into Wilbur Tennant's family farm, the same creek that his children played in and that his cows drank from, they lied straight to his face and told him it was his own fault that things were going wrong on his farm, and they would still be doing that without the hard work of Rob Billet and the EPA. So this story is pretty disturbing, and it's pretty recent. For the design, I mainly focused on a couple different features. I really wanted the idea of like dirty or tainted water to be throughout the character design, so I have this like dishwater gray color kind of throughout. Because the poison in the water was causing birth defects around the eyes of both animals and people, and because DuPont itself had so many eyes in the community trying to prevent both the farmer and the lawyer from continuing their investigation, I drew one of her eyes with a bunch of different irises inside. I also gave her kind of like a lamprey or leech mouth because the company itself was leeching off of this community and basically a parasite. Next, let's talk about Meta. Meta is an enormous company that owns both Facebook, Instagram, a variety of other social media websites. They own Oculus. They are inventing the metaverse. So a very, very large social media company and tech company. However, Meta's been in hot water a lot of times. I'm going to talk specifically about one of the most awful ways that Facebook was specifically used to hurt a lot of people, and how that event is not just an accident, but actually something Facebook really could have helped prevent or at least reduce the impact of, and they chose not to. So this all happened in the country of Myanmar. Myanmar was a very isolated country. They were very shut off. They were not like modernizing in the way that a lot of us are used to. However, in 2011, Myanmar suddenly sort of opens up and it comes online for the first time ever, really. Facebook jumps on this opportunity and basically strikes a bunch of deals with the phone and like smartphone companies who are selling in Myanmar, which basically makes it so that every phone that you buy in the country is preloaded with Facebook installed. Even more than that, they also, through these deals, make it free to be on the internet as long as you're on Facebook, which basically causes everybody in Myanmar to use primarily just Facebook, because unlike everywhere else on the internet, it's free to browse. So everyone really buys into Facebook specifically. It becomes the internet of Myanmar. In Myanmar, there were a lot of tensions between the military dictators who ran what was at the time called Burma and the Rohingya people who were a religious minority there. But as you can imagine, these tensions and kind of the bad things people would say about the Rohingya got really, really extreme once Facebook entered the country. As we know, the algorithms that make these social media so addictive also tend to surface the most extreme type of content, and whatever keeps people on the platform longest are what gets rewarded on a lot of social media sites. This is why moderation is so important on social media, beyond even just the obvious reasons, but also because the algorithm itself is kind of like an anti-moderation machine that rewards things that make people angry and scared. A Buddhist monk and extremist called Ashtin Wiratu starts posting these videos saying that the Rohingya want to turn this entire country into their country, that they're going to start attacking the women of Myanmar, but it's just basically spreading a ton of propaganda against this minority group. So much hate and lies are being whipped up about them on Facebook that it actually causes some people to act. There is a big random attack on the Rohingya people where a ton of their businesses and homes are burned to the ground and at least 92 people are killed. At this point, journalist Ella Callan flies from Myanmar to Silicon Valley and warns them in 2013 that something really bad is brewing on their website and they need to do more to moderate it. At that point, they only have a single person in their entire org who speaks Burmese, which is only one of many languages that are spoken in Myanmar. So basically, there is no moderation in the country where Facebook is basically the only internet that they have. She returns in 2014 to talk to them about this again, because at this point there's been even more violence and the military is utilizing Facebook even more directly, having their own profiles and even putting in fake profiles that appear to be about innocent things like beauty and fashion, but then will start piping in propaganda once they have huge amounts of followers. And at that point, Facebook still only has one moderator who can speak even one of the languages that are spoken in Myanmar. So basically, Facebook does nothing. They don't do anything to stop the extreme spread of propaganda and hate speech and hateful ads that are being served on Facebook until 2018, after which point the Rohingya have already been wiped out of the country. They've even been pushed out, or they've literally been killed. If you want the full story on this, watch the YouTube video How Facebook Became a Tool for Genocide by Johnny Harris. It is fantastic. It's really easy to understand. But I didn't want to just talk about this because this is important recent history. I want to talk about this to give context to how scary it is what Meta is doing now. Here are some recent changes to their hate speech policy. Though they ban insults about mental characteristics, it says explicitly, we do allow allegations of mental illness or abnormality when based on gender or sexual orientation, given the political and religious discourse about transgenderism and homosexuality. They also now allow content arguing for the gender-based limitations of military, law enforcement, and teaching jobs. They allow the same content based on sexual orientation when the content is based on religious belief. So just to be clear, it's against their policies to call anyone but trans and gay people stupid or mentally ill as an insult. Okay, cool. That's a great policy, Meta. I think it's really interesting that in their moderation policies, they've actually carved it out so that only the most vulnerable people in our community can be insulted without any sort of penalty. I don't know what they could possibly say to defend this, because it's not even a free speech issue if you're only allowed to do it to the most vulnerable population. This is cowardly, this sucks, and it shows that this is not really an accident. There's a reason Meta keeps getting tied to these situations where hate speech on their platform gets so extreme that people actually get hurt. And I really think they need to change their ways if they don't want what they've created to keep getting used to cause violence and pain in the world. Next, let's talk about Johnson & Johnson, a family company. Now, they've been in trouble loads of times, actually. There's been a lot of class action lawsuits against them, a lot of personal injury cases against them. I'm going to talk specifically about the baby powder thing, which you may or may not have heard about. This has been a conversation for a long time about the dangers of talc and if talc is actually dangerous for you. But I'm going to discuss specifically how Johnson & Johnson reacted when they first started losing business because of the worries about talc, asbestos, and cancer in their baby powder. So a little background, talc is the softest type of mineral that we have, and that's why it's used for these powders a lot. Talc by itself doesn't seem to be too dangerous, but the problem is talc almost always grows alongside asbestos, and it's almost impossible to mine it without asbestos getting in. Now, any cosmetics company that uses talc will swear up and down that talc is safe, which is technically true. Talc is safe, but they almost always get contaminated with asbestos, which is something that there's no safe level of inhalation. And we're talking about powders that are puffing up in your face, and especially powders that they suggested people use as antiperspirants to put in their clothes and their underwear. It's really dangerous if there's even a little bit of asbestos. When sales started dipping because a lot of people were worried about the dangers of talc to be used on their babies or themselves, internal documents show that they specifically started targeting overweight women and African Americans specifically. An internal J&J memo suggests investigating ethnic opportunities to grow the franchise while referring to negative publicity from the health community on talc, including inhalation, dust, negative doctor endorsement, and cancer linkage. J&J's own manufacturer of talc actually would put on each of their shipments to J&J that there were possible carcinogenic risks to using the baby powder as an antiperspirant, the way that like adults use baby powder, and J&J did not pass that on to the consumer, and they also started distributing baby powder samples through churches and beauty salons in Hispanic and African American neighborhoods. They teamed up with Weight Watchers and did radio advertising, and were really pushing it on these specific groups, which wouldn't necessarily be a problem as long as there wasn't actually asbestos in the baby powder. But there was. Because of all these court cases, there are lab reports and documents from within Johnson & Johnson that show that ever since 1957, they've been finding asbestos fibers in their talc supply. In 2019, the FDA also found asbestos in Johnson & Johnson baby powder. Johnson & Johnson refuses to admit that this is a real problem. They even have a website called factsaboutalc.com where it talks about how safe talc is. I think one of the ways they're able to say that they don't find asbestos in their talc is by using a type of testing that cannot detect most types of asbestos at low levels, nor one common type at all. That common type is the exact type of asbestos that was found in 2019. Johnson & Johnson is very litigious. They're actually suing 2 doctors for citing a link between talc-based powders and cancer. This is all just a compilation of stuff that already has been reported on and exists on the internet, so hopefully they do not come for me. Now, of course, I couldn't have an evil corporations video without talking about United Healthcare. Obviously, United Healthcare has been in the news quite a bit lately. And I'm also actually going to be talking about a scandal that United Healthcare shares with Cigna. Now, unlike a lot of the other cases that I've talked about earlier in the video, these things are kind of still ongoing. We don't have as much hard copies and hard evidence that's available to the public just yet because a lot of this is still happening. It's still getting decided in court. So keep that in mind while I'm telling you all of this information, but essentially the things that are really getting United Healthcare in hot water and Cigna Health Group in hot water are their usage of AI or algorithms to, it seems like, auto-deny people's claims when it comes to their healthcare. Now, as everybody knows, America has horrible healthcare costs. It's extremely expensive to be insured, but the flip side of that is that you're supposed to get good coverage if you actually need to go to the doctor, if you need a blood test, if you need medication. The idea is you're paying this high monthly fee so that these things will be covered, and certainly in emergencies that you won't be medically bankrupted. So what insurance companies are supposed to do is when a doctor asks for, say, a blood test, a surgery for their patient, they send that over to the health insurance group, and if that is covered under your plan, they are supposed to pay for that. However, it seems like a lot of these healthcare companies, particularly United and Cigna, are denying claims for things that they are supposed to cover, and it seems like they're now even using technology to do that faster. In Cigna's case, it's a technology called PXDX that allowed them to refuse to pay for 300,000 claims in 2 months, spending less than 2 seconds on average on each case, which seriously calls into question whether a real doctor is actually looking at these files and confirming whether or not they should be paying for this or not, or whether it's medically necessary or not. A class action complaint from Minnesota is arguing that UnitedHealth is using this AI system on purpose to deny claims that they know they should be covering, because apparently only 0.2% of policyholders will actually appeal the denied claims, which allows United to just put that money straight back into their pocket. And again, that means putting people who are elderly, who are sick and hurt in bad financial situations, or causing them not to get the care that they need because they cannot afford it. That's the type of money they're putting back in their pocket. That's blood money. So obviously I depicted these healthcare companies as basically these soulless vampires who are reaping the financial benefits of not protecting their patients. I also, of course, have his skin peeling away because now they're using algorithms and AI in order to shirk responsibility even more. I put a little $16 billion award on his chest, just a certain amount of profit that United has put away. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's a bit of a darker topic than I usually discuss, but I think it's really important for us to share these stories because these big corporations have huge PR firms and spend billions of dollars on marketing so that we don't know these stories. And I think it's really important that we all stay informed, even if they don't want us to be. Thank you for watching till the end, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much to my wonderful members and patrons, including Philip Verbicario, Celery Sticks, I'm a Potato, Prince Piplup III, Honey Kitten, Nee Nico, Novel Goblin, Loro, Dada, Lily McFarlane, Artist James, Skitten, Gold Pikachu, Clad, Songbird Galesworth, Sunshine, Whimsic, Asri Cryptid, Hoodle Doodle, River the Goblin, Raz Tarosh, Kobe Octo VTuber, Graveyard Moss, Grexius, Maddie Momo, The Midwestern Menace, CB, Lucy Amajiki, Live Live, Raven's Crow, Zocelot, T-Hill Music, Jabber Dabber Doo, Light Jewel, Kadaria, The Expressive Poker Face, Tsubaki, Cutie Pie, Ice Cream Pal, Kola, JJ Jade, and of course, Libla Bubla.